"I'm sorry, sir, but you're not on the guest list." The receptionist at the Grandview Ballroom stared at me with a professional smile that barely concealed the embarrassment in her eyes. Behind her, through the ornate glass doors, I could see my father's 50th birthday party in full swing. 50 years of life being celebrated in the most expensive ballroom in Chicago, overlooking Lake Michigan. And I, who had transferred $30,000 to his account last week when my mother called me crying about the unexpected costs of the party, was standing outside like a stranger. "There must be a mistake," I muttered, adjusting the Hermes tie I had bought especially for this occasion. "I'm Vic, his oldest son." The woman consulted her digital list again, frowning. "Here I have Jennifer and Michael Patterson as the birthday boy's children, but there's no Vic." Jennifer. My younger sister, the golden princess of the family who hadn't worked in 2 years since marrying a real estate agent. Michael. My middle brother, eternal MBA student who at 32 was still receiving an allowance from our parents. And me? I had been the family's personal bank for over a decade. Through the glass, I recognized my father's Armani suit and my mother's Chanel dress. Clothes I had financed during their temporary difficulties the previous year. The decor was stunning: white orchid arrangements, crystal chandeliers, tables covered with imported linen tablecloths. All paid for with my money. My name is Vic Patterson, I'm 38 years old, I'm a financial advisor, and I just found out that I wasn't invited to my own father's 50th birthday party. This after I paid for the entire party when my mother called me last week, her voice breaking. "Vic dear, you know how expensive these things are. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing, 50 years, you understand, right?" Of course I understood. I always did. "Can I talk to the event planner?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the hurricane inside me. As she disappeared through a side door, I watched other guests pass by me, being warmly welcomed and ushered inside. I recognized familiar faces: uncles, cousins, old family friends. All elegantly dressed, all part of a celebration from which I had been deliberately excluded. My phone vibrated. A notification from the bank confirming that the payment of $30,000 had been processed yesterday. The same amount my mother said was absolutely necessary to cover the final costs of the party. Since I achieved financial success at the age of 26, I was always the first to receive calls when emergencies arose. My parents' roof needed repairs, Jennifer's car broke down when she was short on cash, Michael needed a loan to start that app company that went bankrupt in 6 months. The receptionist returned with a man in a dark suit who introduced himself as the event manager. "Mr. Patterson, I understand there's been a mix-up with the guest list." "It's not a mistake," I replied, showing the transfer receipt on my cell phone. "I paid for this party. $30,000 transferred last week, plus the $15,000 I sent last month as a down payment." The manager looked uncomfortable. "Sir, our policy is very clear. We can only allow people who have been expressly authorized by the contractors to enter." "The contractors are my parents." "Yes, sir, but they were very specific with the list. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. The word echoed in my mind as I watched my family celebrating through the glass. Jennifer was the center of attention, as always, telling some story that had everyone laughing. Michael was near the bar, probably drinking the scotch I had paid for. If you're following this story and have been through something similar, be sure to subscribe to the channel to see how it all unfolded. Because what happened next completely changed my perspective on family and money. And it made me make a decision I should have made a long time ago. While they celebrated inside with my money, I was about to find out exactly how much this loving family was really worth. I got in my car and drove to a coffee shop across the street, where I had a perfect view of the Grandview Ballroom. I needed to process what had just happened and watch my family from afar. Sitting by the window with a bitter coffee that perfectly matched my mood, I began to connect the dots of a pattern I had ignored for years. I opened my banking app and started reviewing the transfers from the last few months. $30,000 for the birthday. $12,000 for urgent repairs to the air conditioning at my parents' house in July. $8,000 to help Jennifer with her kids' school expenses. $15,000 for Michael to invest in yet another doomed project. And that was just in the last 4 months. My phone rang. It was James, my best friend since college and technically my father's half-brother, but raised separately. "Vic man, did you get to the party? I'm here and I don't see you." My voice betrayed the bitterness I was trying to control. I'm outside. They won't let me in. Apparently, I'm not on the guest list. Silence on the other end of the line. That's impossible. You're his son. That's what I thought. Listen, can you discreetly find out what's going on? While James investigated inside, I continued to analyze my financial history. Over the past 10 years, I had transferred $287,000 to my family. Almost $300,000 in emergencies, investment opportunities, and special celebrations. I remembered my mother's phone call 3 weeks ago. Vic dear, you know how your father is about money. The party expenses are running high, and we don't want to disappoint our friends. You've always been our most responsible son, the only one we can trust with these things. Responsible. Trustworthy. Words I had interpreted as love, but now sounded like synonyms for convenient. James called me back 20 minutes later, his voice heavy with indignation. Vic, you won't believe what I just heard. Tell me. I was standing near your parents' table when someone asked for you. Your mother said, and I quote, "We decided to make the party more intimate, just for people who are really part of our social life." Vic is very focused on his work. He wouldn't feel comfortable in that kind of environment. My fist automatically clenched around the phone. The social life I financed. It gets worse. Jennifer was laughing and said you wouldn't even notice the difference because you're always too busy to show up. That's a lie. I had canceled important meetings to be present at the last 3 family celebrations. My mother's 70th birthday, Jennifer's son's graduation, my cousin's wedding. Always present, always paying, always treated like a second-class guest. And there's more, James continued. Michael was telling a group how he convinced you to invest in his startup. He called you the family bank, and everyone laughed. Family bank. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. That was exactly what I was to them. Not a son, not a brother. A financial resource that was exploited and then ignored when it wasn't convenient. Through the cafeteria window, I watched a group of guests leave to smoke outside the Grandview. I recognized my Uncle Robert, whom I had lent $5,000 last year to cover a medical emergency and who never mentioned it again. Next to him was my cousin Diana, whom I had helped with the down payment on her house. Everyone was there. All the people I had helped financially over the years were celebrating with my parents, while I, the one who had actually made the party possible, stood outside, excluded and humiliated. James, I need to ask you a favor. Anything, man. Can you discreetly find out how much they said they spent on the party and who else contributed financially? I'll look into it. While I waited, I opened my laptop and started creating a detailed spreadsheet. Every transfer, every loan, every temporary help. Date, amount, recipient, justification given. The pattern that emerged was devastating. They used me systematically and then discarded me. My mother's call from last week came back to me with disturbing clarity. Vic, you're the only one who can help us with these final expenses. We know you understand the importance of family. Family. They used that word like a magic key that opened my wallet. But apparently it didn't open the doors to the events I was financing. James called me back. I got the information. According to your mother, they saved for years for this party and got some contributions from close relatives, but she didn't specify amounts or names. Saved. Contributions from close relatives. More lies to hide the fact that I had financed this $50,000 celebration practically on my own. I closed my laptop with a decision crystallized in my mind. For 10 years, I had allowed them to treat me like a walking ATM. I financed their lives, their dreams, their celebrations, and in return, I received crumbs of attention and respect. But now, for the first time, I had a clear view of how they really saw me. And if they wanted to treat me like a bank, maybe it was time to start acting like one. Banks have terms, conditions, and most importantly, consequences when contracts are broken. It was time to do a complete audit of my family account and decide if this relationship still offered a return on investment. I returned home with a determination I hadn't felt in years. My downtown Chicago apartment, with its panoramic view of the city, suddenly felt like a refuge from the toxicity I had normalized for so long. I turned on my main computer and began doing something I should have done a decade ago, a complete financial audit of the Patterson family. Because if they wanted to play the financial manipulation game, they had just discovered they had picked the wrong opponent. As the data loaded on my screen, James arrived with a bottle of bourbon and a grim expression. "Man, you need to hear what happened after you left. Tell me everything. Your mother walked by the table where I was sitting and asked me if I'd seen you around. When I told her you tried to get in but were stopped, she laughed. She literally laughed, Vic. And she said, 'Oh, he'll get over it. Vic always understands these things. He's too mature for drama.'" Mature for drama. Translation: conditioned to accept any humiliation without question. "There's more," James continued, pouring 2 generous shots. "I heard Jennifer telling a group how you always show up at family events, wanting to be the center of attention. She said they decided to have a more refined celebration, without complicated personalities." Complicated personality. Me, who had paid for the dress she wore, the gift she gave our parents, probably even the babysitter who was watching her kids that night. I opened my main bank account and started pulling up detailed reports. Every PIX transfer, every deposit, every bill payment I had made to family members. The accounting software I used for my clients became my personal investigation tool. "James, you work in data analysis. Can you help me with something?" "Sure." We spent the next 2 hours creating a spreadsheet that would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. $287,457 over 10 years. Not to mention the interest that money could have earned if it had been invested properly. "My God, Vic," James muttered, looking at the figures. "With that money, you could have bought a house on the beach. Or 2 smaller houses. Or taken that trip around the world I've always dreamed of," I replied bitterly. But the worst was yet to come. As we organized the data into categories, a sinister pattern emerged. Family emergencies always coincided with important social events. The urgent roof repair had come 3 weeks before a wealthy cousin's wedding. Jennifer's financial crisis coincided exactly with the elite school enrollment season for her children. "They plan," I whispered, and the revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning. "These aren't emergencies. They're strategies." James pointed to a series of transfers from last summer. "Look at this. $12,000 in June for your father's urgent medical expenses. But look here on the credit card statements you showed me, they took a trip to the Bahamas in July. Medical expenses. Luxury vacations." The lie was so blatant it was impressive. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Vic, honey, we missed you so much at the party tonight. I hope you understand, it was a more intimate affair, you know how it is." I put it on speaker so James could hear. "Hi, Mom. How was the celebration?" "Wonderful. Your brothers were so thoughtful. Jennifer organized a beautiful tribute, and Michael gave a touching speech about family. You would have been so proud of them." "Proud of my brothers who didn't contribute a penny to the party that cost me $40,000. I'm glad, Mom. I'm sure it was very special." It was. "By the way, Vic, your father is a little concerned about some bills that came in today. You know how he gets about these things. Could we talk tomorrow about a little help?" 3 hours after excluding me from the party I paid for, she was already asking for more money. The audacity was impressive. "Sure, Mom. What kind of bills?" "You know, the usual stuff. The credit card went a little crazy this month because of the party, and there are a few things pending with the caterer." Things pending with the caterer. The caterer I had paid in full the week before. "No problem, Mom. We'll talk tomorrow." After she hung up, James looked at me in disbelief. "She's got some nerve." "It's not nerve," I replied, a crystalline coldness taking hold of me. "It's certainty. They're absolutely certain that I'll always pay, I'll always accept, I'll always understand." I opened my laptop again and started doing something I had never done before, investigating every member of my family on social media. What I found made me question my own sanity over the past few years. Jennifer's Instagram, photos of expensive dinners at Chicago restaurants, designer clothes, frequent trips. All posted around the same time she was calling me for financial help for basic necessities. Michael's Facebook, check-ins at fancy bars, photos of expensive electronics, weekend trips. A lifestyle incompatible with someone who was struggling to survive as a student. My parents' profile, photos of the newly renovated house I had financed, the new car I had co-signed for, dozens of photos at social clubs whose annual fees I paid. "James, look at this," he said, showing me a photo of my parents at a five-star restaurant, taken the week before. They were having dinner at Le Bernardin the night before they called me asking for money for the party. Le Bernardin. $300 per person. The same day my mother was crying on the phone about financial difficulties. The anger that had been simmering all day finally crystallized into something more powerful, a cold, calculated determination. For years, I had operated under the assumption that we were a family with temporary financial difficulties. But the truth was very different. They had an active and expensive social life, secretly financed by me, while keeping me isolated from that same social life. "I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago," I announced to James. "What?" "I'm going to treat this like any other bad investment in my portfolio. I'm cutting my losses." James smiled for the first time in hours. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" I looked at the spreadsheet on my screen, then at the photos on social media, and finally at the receipt for the $40,000 transfer I had made to a party I had been excluded from. A plan began to form in my mind. Elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its implications. They want to treat me like a bank, James. And banks have very specific policies on default and breach of contract. I grabbed my phone and started making some calls. First to my personal lawyer. Then to the company accountant. And lastly, to a private investigator I had used in corporate fraud cases. If my family wanted to play the financial manipulation game, they had just discovered they had picked the wrong opponent. I wasn't just the naive son they could exploit indefinitely. I was an experienced financial advisor with resources, connections, and for the first time in 10 years, a real motivation to use both. The birthday party was over for them. But my investigation was just beginning. While they slept peacefully, thinking they had once again manipulated their personal bank, I was organizing the most important case of my career. Not a client's case. The case of my own dignity. And this time, there would be no negotiation. Monday arrived with the precision of a Swiss watch, and I was in my office at 6 in the morning, 3 hours before my usual start time. I had spent all Sunday developing what I mentally called Operation Family Audit. If they wanted to treat me like a bank, I would behave exactly like a financial institution that discovers systematic fraud. My first call was to David Chun, the private investigator who had helped me uncover a money laundering scheme at a client company 2 years earlier. David had access to public databases that I couldn't access on my own. "Greg, man, it's been a while. What can I do for you?" "I need a complete financial investigation on 4 people. Credit reports, public tax returns, property, investments. Anything that's legal to access. Family or business." "Technically family, but treat it as business." I gave David my parents' and siblings' details, explaining that I suspected discrepancies between what they told me about their financial situation and the reality. "In 24 hours, you'll have a complete picture of who they really are financially." My second call was to Amanda Rodriguez, my personal accountant. A brilliant woman who had transformed my tax situation from chaotic to exemplary in 3 years. "Amanda, I need a delicate favor. Could you help me draft a document that formalizes family loans as legitimate business transactions?" "Sure, but can I ask why?" I explained the situation without getting into emotional details. Amanda had seen similar cases, families that exploited financially successful members until they were drained. "Vic, it's more common than you think. I'll draw up retroactive loan agreements with standard commercial interest rates. Legally, you have the right to formalize these transactions and demand payment." While waiting for the results of the investigations, I decided to do my own field research. I called my cousin Sophia, my mother's sister's daughter, who had always been the official family gossip. "Vic, what an amazing party yesterday, right?" "I couldn't make it, Sophia. Scheduling issues." "What a shame. Your parents looked so proud. Your mother was telling everyone how you kids got together to throw this wonderful party for them." "Interesting. Official version, the kids got together. Reality, Vic paid for everything himself." "Really? What else did she say?" "That the 3 of you planned everything together, each contributing his or her specialty. Jennifer with the organization, Michael with the social part, and you with, well, you know, the practical part." "The practical part. An elegant euphemism for paid the bill." "And people believed it." "Of course. Everyone was impressed with the Patterson family's togetherness. In fact, your mother mentioned that they're planning a big family trip for next year. To Europe. A family trip to Europe. It was the first I'd heard of it, but apparently it was already in the works. Or at least my wallet was. On Tuesday, David's first report came in, and the findings were more shocking than I had anticipated. My parents, who claimed to be in constant financial difficulty, actually had a net worth of approximately $400,000. Their house was paid off, they had 2 cars, a substantial savings account, and investments in stocks. Vic, not only are your parents not broke, they're quite well off, David explained over the phone. Their tax returns show that they've had enough income to cover all their expenses for the last few years without any outside help. What about my siblings? Jennifer has a combined household income of $120,000 a year with her husband. Michael receives a $45,000 research grant, plus consulting work that he doesn't report properly. I was financing people who didn't need financing. For 10 years, I had been systematically deceived by a family that orchestrated financial crises to keep me as their source of extra income. On Wednesday, Amanda brought the retroactive loan agreements. $287,457 plus 6% compound interest per year, the standard rate for unsecured personal loans. The total comes to $342,812, Amanda announced. Legally, you can demand payment in full or establish a payment plan. $55,355 more in interest alone. The value of a luxury car they owed me just for the opportunity cost of the money. What if they refuse to pay? You can sue them. With all the documentation we have, it's a solid case. But I didn't just want my money back. I wanted them to understand exactly how they had treated me for a decade. I wanted them to face the consequences of their systematic manipulation. I wanted poetic justice. On Thursday, my mother called, just as I had expected. Vic, honey, do you have a few minutes to talk about those bills I mentioned? Sure, Mom. But first I wanted to ask you about the party. I heard it was wonderful. Oh, it was divine. Everyone commented on how well organized it was. We are so grateful for our children. I'm glad to hear it. What about those bills? Well, the credit card went a little crazy, and there are some outstanding bills from the party vendors. Nothing serious, but you know how your father gets. How much exactly? About $15,000. I know it's a little high, but you always understand these situations. $15,000 to cover the cost of a party I had already paid for in full. It was officially the last straw. Mom, I actually need to talk to you about something important. How about I come over on Saturday? We can talk about it calmly. That's wonderful. I'll make that chocolate cake you like so much. If you're following this story and are curious about what I was planning, keep watching, because what happened next was the kind of twist that changes everything forever. I spent Friday finalizing the details of my plan. I printed out all the financial reports, organized the loan agreements into neat folders, and prepared a PowerPoint presentation that I would use on Saturday. The title of the first slide was simple: Family Financial Audit, Results and Recommendations. I also prepared 3 sealed envelopes. Each contained a copy of each family member's specific loan agreements, along with a detailed payment schedule. Jennifer owed me $68,000. Michael owed me $75,000. My parents owed me the rest. But there was a 4th envelope. This one was addressed to the entire family. Inside was my letter of resignation as the family ATM, effective immediately. On Saturday morning, I drove to my parents' house in Evanston for the last time as the obedient, exploited son. When I left a few hours later, our family dynamic would be completely different. Or there would be no family dynamic at all. I carried an executive briefcase that contained the future of the Patterson family. Inside were not just documents, but 10 years of truths they had managed to avoid through carefully constructed lies. But lies have an expiration date. And today, that date would expire. As I pulled into the driveway, I looked at the house I had helped renovate, at the yard I had financed, at the windows that showed the comfortable interior maintained with my money. It was the last time I would see all of this through the eyes of a manipulated son. In a few hours, I would either be seen as a respected member of this family, or I would no longer be seen as a member at all. And for the first time in 10 years, I was completely at peace with both possibilities. The hardest part wouldn't be confronting them. It would be watching their masks slip when they realized the game had changed for good. And that this time, I was the one calling the shots. I arrived at my parents' house at 2 in the afternoon, carrying the briefcase that held the future of the Patterson family. My mother greeted me with a warm hug and a smile that I now recognized as purely transactional. "Vic, how wonderful to see you, dear. Your father is in the living room," and I also called Jennifer and Michael. I thought it would be good for us all to talk about the family finances. Of course she had called my siblings. Probably to share the psychological pressure and ensure that I couldn't refuse to help with an audience present. I entered the room where the whole family was gathered. Jennifer was on the sofa with her princess smile, Michael was relaxed in the armchair as if he owned the place, and my father was reading the newspaper with his perpetually serious expression. The same setup as always. They were comfortable. I was summoned to solve problems. "Well, Vic's here," my mother announced. "We can talk about those things I mentioned." I opened my briefcase and took out the main folder. "Actually, Mom, I'm the one who needs to talk to you about some important financial matters." My father put down the newspaper and frowned. "What kind of matters?" "Audit matters," I replied calmly, handing out copies of a 20-page document. "I've spent the week doing a detailed analysis of all financial transactions between this family and me over the last 10 years. Jennifer took the document with disinterest, but her expression quickly changed when she saw the numbers on the first page. "Vic, what is this?" "It's a complete report of every loan, transfer and payment I've made to each of you since 2014. Michael flipped through a few pages and turned pale. "Loans? You never said they were loans." "Interesting observation, Michael. On page 12, you'll find a legal analysis of the difference between loans and gifts under federal law. All of the transfers I made can be legally classified as loans, especially considering that you always promised to pay them back when your situation improved." My father finally gave his full attention and adjusted his glasses to read better. "342,000? That can't be right." "It's absolutely correct, Dad. 287,000 in direct transfers plus 6% compound interest per year, the standard market rate." My mother sat down heavily, still trying to process the information. "But Vic dear, these weren't. You always said it was to help the family." "And I did. For 10 years. But this week I discovered some interesting things." I took the second set of documents out of my briefcase. "David Chun, licensed private investigator, conducted an independent financial analysis on each of you." The room fell silent. "Dad, you and Mom have a net worth of $400,000. Your house is paid off, you have investments, solid savings accounts. Over the past 5 years, your household income has been sufficient to cover all expenses without outside assistance." My father opened his mouth to protest, but I continued. "Jennifer, your combined household income is $120,000 a year. You're not struggling to make ends meet like you claimed. Your tax returns show consistent spending on luxuries." Jennifer blushed. "Did you hire an investigator to spy on our family?" "I hired a professional to verify the information you provided when requesting financial assistance," I corrected. "And Michael, your systems development consulting work generates about $30,000 a year that you don't report properly, in addition to your official salary." Michael exploded. "That's invasion of privacy." "It's a credibility check," I replied calmly. "Something I should have done years ago." My mother found her voice, trying to adopt the motherly tone that always worked. "Vic, even if we have some resources, family is family. We'll always be here for you too." I laughed sincerely for the first time in days. "Mom, when was the last time any of you offered me help? Financial, emotional, or of any kind?" Silence. "I'll tell you, never. In 10 years, there hasn't been a single occasion when you've shown concern for my well-being, my problems, or my needs." I took out the third set of documents. "These are screenshots of your social media posts from the last 2 years. Jennifer, you posted photos of dinners at expensive restaurants in the same weeks you called me asking for money for basic expenses." I showed them the printouts. "Michael, you bought $5,000 worth of video game equipment in the same month you claimed you couldn't pay the rent. And you, Mom and Dad, took a trip to the Bahamas 3 weeks after asking me for $12,000 for Dad's urgent medical expenses. My father tried to regain his authority. "Vic, you're exaggerating. Those were coincidences." "They weren't coincidences," I interrupted, pulling out another document. "I hired a data analyst to trace the temporal correlations. 93% of her requests for financial assistance occurred between 1 and 3 weeks before significant spending on luxuries or entertainment. The evidence was overwhelming, and everyone knew it. But the best part," I continued, "was finding out about the birthday." Everyone tensed. "You told me the party would cost $25,000. It actually cost $53,000. I paid $40,000, and you guys covered only $13,000. That's exactly the amount you asked me to borrow the following week." Jennifer tried a different approach. "Vic, you're being very cold. We're your family." "Family?" I asked, taking out my phone. "I'm going to play back some conversations I recorded discreetly over the last few days." I pressed play on a recording of my cousin Sophia telling how my mother had lied about all the children contributing to the party. Then a recording of James describing the cruel comments they made about me during the celebration. And lastly, I said, connecting my phone to the TV, some photos from the birthday. The images appeared on the screen. They were celebrating, laughing, toasting. In one particular photo, my mother was showing off the pearl necklace I bought her for Christmas, while saying something that made her laugh. "James got the audio for this specific conversation," I explained, turning up the volume. My mother's voice came out of the speakers. "Vic has always been our most generous son. Sure, he doesn't know much about social life, but he's very useful when we need practical things." The word echoed through the silent room. "So this is the situation," I announced, returning to the briefcase. I distributed the sealed envelopes I had prepared. "You have 2 options. Option 1. You formally acknowledge that all transfers were loans, sign these retroactive contracts, and establish a 5-year payment plan. Total, $342,812. My father opened his envelope, read it quickly, and turned pale. "Vic, that's impossible. We can't pay that amount." "Option 2, I continued, ignoring the protest. "I sue all of you for civil fraud and systematic financial manipulation. My lawyer assures me it's a solid case, especially with all the evidence I've gathered." Michael stood up abruptly. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." Jennifer tried to cry, her oldest strategy. "Vic, please, you're destroying our family." "I'm not destroying anything, Jennifer. I'm just stopping financing the destruction of my own dignity." I took the last envelope out of my briefcase. "But there is a third option that you will prefer." Everyone looked at me with desperate hope. "You can accept that our financial relationship ends today, forever. Never ask me for money again. Never expect me to pay for anything. Never count on me to solve your financial problems." I paused to let it sink in. "In return, I consider the $287,000 a final parting gift. You keep the money, I keep my freedom." The relief on their faces was palpable, until I continued. "But there are conditions. First, if anyone contacts me asking for money in the next 10 years, I will automatically activate Option 2, lawsuit for fraud. Second, if anyone spreads lies about me to other family members, I will sue for defamation. Third, I accept that you won't invite me to family events, but don't ever pretend I'm welcome while you use my money to pay for them." I looked each of them in the eye. "You have 48 hours to decide. I'll leave my answer in writing on Monday." I stood up, closed my briefcase, and headed for the door. "Oh, and that $15,000 you wanted to cover the party expenses? I found out there are no expenses. What happened is that you spent the money I sent on other things and now you need to cover the whole." At the door, I turned around one last time. "For 10 years you treated me like a bank. Now you know how banks behave when they discover fraud." The door closed behind me, leaving them alone with the reality that his personal ATM had just become permanently inaccessible. But what happened next exceeded even my most optimistic expectations about how this story would end. Monday arrived with a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I woke up without the familiar anxiety that had accompanied me for a decade, that constant feeling of waiting for the next emergency that would drain my bank account. At 9 in the morning, Exactly 48 hours after my ultimatum, I got a call from Jennifer. Her voice trembled with barely contained anger. "Vic, we've talked as a family and we've chosen the third option. But I want you to know that you are destroying relationships that can never be repaired." "Understood, Jennifer. I'll put it in writing today. And one more thing," she continued, revealing her true nature. "Don't be surprised if other family members find out how you're treating your own family. Actually, Jennifer, feel free to tell them. But be sure to mention the $287,000 they owe me and how I found out they lied to me about their financial situation for a decade." Silence. Then the sound of the phone being hung up abruptly. Michael called an hour later, trying to appeal to nostalgia. My parents attempted one last coordinated manipulation at the end of the day. Everyone agreed on the third option, but only to avoid legal consequences. Starting on Tuesday, I began receiving unexpected phone calls. First it was my cousin Rebecca, who had been at the birthday party. "Vic, I heard from Jennifer about what happened. She's trying to paint you as the villain, but I was there. I saw how they talked about you. You did the right thing." My Uncle Robert called to apologize and propose a payment schedule for the $5,000. Apparently, my cousin Sophia had spread details of the investigation, and several relatives were reconsidering their relationship with me. The most surprising revelation came from my Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister. "Vic, I need to tell you something. Your grandmother Eleanor left you a letter before she died. She asked me to give it to you when you woke up to reality," in her words. The letter revealed a bank account with $50,000 that she had saved specifically for when I freed myself from this dynamic. On Thursday, I received a totally unexpected call from the event planner at the Grandview Ballroom, offering free services as a formal apology for the birthday embarrassment. On Friday, the finalized legal document arrived. Amanda had crafted an agreement that protected both parties. They got the money, I got my freedom. The biggest transformation was happening inside me. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on what I wanted, not what my family needed. I started planning that trip around the world I had always dreamed of. "Man, you look 10 years younger," James commented. "I feel reborn," I admitted. I had no idea how much weight I was carrying. 3 months later, I threw my own party at the Grandview Ballroom, a gathering to thank the people who truly valued me. This time, I was genuinely surrounded by people who cared about me, not my wallet. My parents and siblings weren't invited. And for the first time, that exclusion was a conscious choice on my part. 6 months after my ultimatum, my life had improved beyond recognition. Financially, I was able to accelerate my retirement plans by 5 years. Emotionally, the constant anxiety was gone. Socially, I discovered authentic relationships. Occasionally, I heard news through relatives. My parents adjusted their lifestyle without my secret financial support. Jennifer canceled her home renovation plans. Michael finally got a real job. They survived and thrived in a more honest way. The most valuable lesson I learned was that true love is never conditional on financial resources. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, not usefulness. And sometimes, the greatest demonstration of self-love is walking away from people who only value us for what we can provide. Today, when someone asks me to borrow money, I have clear conversations about terms and expectations. Not because I've become cold, but because I've learned that honest relationships thrive on transparency, not manipulation. My wallet may be fuller, but my heart is infinitely lighter. It's a trade I would make again in a heartbeat. If this story touched you in any way, if you recognize similar patterns in your own life, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your experiences in the comments. Remember, you are worth more than you can offer others. Your value is inherent, not transactional. And it's never too late to redefine relationships based on mutual respect.